We're going to talk about sports nicknames. Do you have a favorite sports team? Of course, we got the Hawkeyes and the Cyclones and the Panthers and all these things around here, the Bulldogs. Where did those names ever come from, and who else has those names? You can find out by getting the complete book of sports nicknames, and one of the authors is Burnham Holmes. And Burnham, thank you so much for being with us today.
Well, thank you for having me.
We, of course, are the Hawkeye State here, and you detail in unbelievable form all the different names of not just college teams and pro teams, but you also get down into individual nicknames of players. That's probably the bulk of the book.
Right.
Where in the world did you come up with all these?
Well, it came with haunting libraries and bookstores. I was living in New York City at the time, and I used to close out a lot of bookstores. Authors are known for closing out bars, but I was closing out bookstores, and they were always saying, last call for books. Do you want to buy any books? And I'm sorry, it's 12 o'clock. But I used to just haunt bookstores and old bookstores, too. A lot of used bookstores, because I found that to be a treasure trove of nicknames. And newspaper research, there was a Spalding library, a baseball library, and they had a lot of print materials, and I would just pore over these things, and I would take a lot of tips from my dad or my dad's friends, or that they remembered stuff. But it really showed me the use of the computer, because without the computer, I can't imagine. There were so many individual scraps of paper as it was that my family kind of called it my disaster, the basement of the house, because it was just, you couldn't walk anywhere. There was just a paper on every square inch.
Now, what were some of the unusual nicknames that you found? I mean, there's just hundreds and hundreds of them in the book, so what are some of your favorites? Just to give people an example.
My favorites are Double Duty.
Double Duty?
Double Duty. That was Ted Radcliffe, and he was in the Negro Leagues, and he was so good that he was a catcher and a pitcher, and his team was playing at Yankee Stadium one time, and he caught Satchel Paige in the first game of a doubleheader, and they won, I think 5-0, and then he pitched the second game of the doubleheader, and he won 4-1. Damon Runyon was in the audience that day, and he said, you must go see Ted Radcliffe, because he's a double duty. You get double your money with him.
That's where he got his name.
And that's where he got his name. He loved to play. Another story that I liked about him, he was like Mr. Cub, Mr. Ernie Banks. He couldn't get enough baseball. He not only would say, let's play 2, but let's play 4. There was one time when Radcliffe played a game in the morning, and then a doubleheader in the afternoon, and a game at night, and he woke up the next morning still wearing his baseball uniform.
Burnham, we've got some callers on the line to answer some questions. We'll do that, and then I want to talk about some of those politically incorrect names, okay? Okay, Chris, you're up first. You ready for the sports nickname quiz?
Yes.
Okay, we've got one book to give away, and so whoever gets this right, we're going to pick out of all those names, okay? Chris, let me ask you the question. What pro-Chicago team was almost called the Chicago Colts or the Chicago Orphans? This is one of the pro-Chicago teams. They were almost called the Chicago Colts or the Chicago Orphans.
The Bears?
No, that's a good guess. It was the Cubs.
Okay.
Can you believe that? Thanks for calling, Chris. Yeah, Burnham, it's interesting to read in the book some of the choices that some of these teams could have been, right?
Right.
Some very unusual. Jerry, you're up next with our guest, Burnham Holmes. Jerry, you ready for a quiz question?
Yeah, you bet.
Okay, let's ask you that one about the most common nickname of all college athletics. And it has to do with a team here in Iowa. Is the common nickname Panthers, Cyclones, or Bulldogs? It's the most common nickname in all of college athletics.
I'd say Bulldogs.
It is Bulldogs. Isn't that something? 12 different colleges around the nation use Bulldogs. So, Jerry, you stay tuned to WHO. You may be winning that book, okay?
Okay.
So we'll have you call back in. Burnham, I actually sat there and counted up the different colleges and things, and I found out that Tigers came in second and Wildcats came in third. But I was very surprised about Bulldogs being number one.
Yeah, when you said that to me, I was thinking Tigers too, because I came from Missouri, right below you, and I was thinking Tigers too. But I was sitting here counting them up too, and found that Bulldogs and Drake University.
See, I read your book, right? I read your book. So.
Yeah, you sure did. You sure did.
And that's right. Drake's right here.
I'm very impressed.
Well, I'm kind of nitpicky about those things because I thought that was fascinating. I had no clue that Bulldogs would be the number one nickname of all college athletics. So,
Right.
Let's see. Let's go to the phone line. And Kurt, you're up next with our guest Burnham Holmes and the complete book of sports nicknames. Kurt, here's your question. Okay.
Okay.
This one is kind of easy. What's the last name of the football player known as Refrigerator?
Oh,
Remember him?
yeah, I sure do, and I can see him, big guy.
Yep. Played for Chicago Bears. Refrigerator.
Oh, I can't think of it.
Come on.
Refrigerator. I just drew a blank.
Aw.
I can see him.
Thanks for
Big
trying.
blank.
Kurt.
Yep, you bet.
Okay. Amy knows the answer to that one, don't you?
Oh,
Amy?
I know. It's Perry.
Sure, Refrigerator Perry. He was big back in the 80s. Literally big back in the 80s. He was a giant, wasn't he?
Right. Sometimes listed at 326, but I think he was over that.
Wow. Let's talk about some of these politically incorrect names before we get back to some of our callers. One of the big things is about Indian names these days. You know, the Braves, Chiefs, Redskins. There are some groups that are saying those should be done away with. What's your opinion?
Well, we have to change with the times, I think, and I can understand why a group of people might not like the name Indians or Redskins. That it is pejorative, and I guess we can change with the times, but. Things like that, they're so much in the public consciousness, and they're so back in time that they aren't even meant that way anymore.
See, but why couldn't people, for instance, Dutch was the name of a person. Why couldn't people object to that if they were of Dutch heritage? There are people who obviously, when you have names like the Brown Bomber or the Yiddish Curver,
Right.
Yes, I understand where that would be politically incorrect these days, but couldn't everybody be touchy about some name?
Yes, and oftentimes everyone is, yeah, and it gets to the point where what is safe. It's funny. I mean, it makes me think of modern day ball players because there seem to be fewer nicknames nowadays, and one of the reasons is because a guy making a utility infielder making $3 million a year doesn't want to be called Butterfingers. So. A lot of things are image and the amount of money you're making, and people don't want to be called Poopsie anymore.
Yeah, that's right. Back to the phone lines. Ashley, you're up next for one of our sports nickname quiz questions. Hi, Ashley.
How you doing?
Great. Here's a golf question. Before 1969, this famous golfer was known as Ohio Fats, and then he lost 20 pounds, and he hasn't been called that since then.
Jack Nicklaus.
You got it. Good job, Ashley. It was Jack Nicklaus. And Burnham, I was around in the 60s, but I don't remember that.
That he was a bit overweight.
Yeah. And that he was called Ohio Fats.
Yeah, he was a little pudgy. He was so good though. I don't think he was called Ohio Fats too often.
To his face,
certainly not to his face. and certainly not if you were playing golf with him.
That's right. And Burnham, just out of curiosity, what do you do for a living? Do you just sit around and pick out sports nicknames, or what?
Well, I've been doing three things most of my life, and I write, and I teach writing, and I'm also an editor. But I'm most of all a writer right now.
Well, isn't that fascinating? And what other types of things do you write?
Well, I'm writing a book about my wife died of breast cancer this past March. So I'm writing a book about her called Viva Vicky. And I'm also writing another sports book, and it's about sports athletes who've had 15 minutes of fame. It's called One Shining Moment.
That's a great idea for a book.
Yeah, like say a Jackie Mitchell who at age 17 back in 1931 struck out Babe Ruth and Lou Gehrig. And the commissioner of baseball was a little worried having a woman strike out, the two heavyweights of Murderers Row, and he banned women from playing professional baseball.
Boy, that's going to be a great book. I want to interview you when that comes out. Now, of course, this year was the big Mark McGwire year, and they called him Big Mac. Is that nickname going to stick, or do you think there's other ones there?
I think it's inevitable that Big Mac would stick. Yeah, Big Mac works.
Yeah. It just fits, doesn't it? But one of the things you mentioned in the book is the big and little. I think of all the names that are applied to players, the most often used are size names, big and little.
Right.
Why is that?
Well, sometimes they're used to describe physical characteristics, and other times they're used as a joke, calling someone tiny. I remember I used to know a local bartender called Tiny, and his head hit the ceiling. So many times they're opposite nicknames, and sometimes they're curious. Like there was a basketball player named Spud, and you would think it was because he was small, but actually when he was born, his head, one of his neighbors thought his head looked like a Sputnik, and that degenerated into Spud. So sometimes they're curious, and they seem to be about size, but they're not.
Boy, that doesn't make me feel so bad than what I was called when I was little. So
what was that?
You don't want to know. No,
Okay.
Don't start that, Burnham, because then people will call me that on the street.
Okay, I have one of those too, actually.
What were you called?
Thunderbutt.
Oh.
And it was because I was on a paint crew and I was in high school, and I stuck my turpentine rag in my back pocket without thinking what would happen.
So that's why you wrote a book on nicknames. It's that psychological thing there.
Yes. Well, actually, my mother's family was from the South, and every single one of their kids, there were 7 kids, and they all had nicknames. Biffy and Kinky and Reamy, and it sounded like a bunch of dogs, but they all had nicknames. And so I grew up hearing nicknames.
Yeah.
This big lumbering guy was called Kink. He looked like something out of the Munsters, but they called him Kink.
Let's get back to the phone lines, get a couple more questions in here for our sports nickname quiz. Grant, you're up next. Hi, Grant.
Hi.
How old are you?
13.
Okay, what kind of sport do you like?
Basketball.
Basketball? Well, here's a good one for you. I'll try to make it kind of simple for you, okay? The Knickerbockers is the actual name for what team?
The Knicks.
Yeah, the New York Knicks, yeah. And their actual name is Knickerbockers. Good job, Grant. You stay tuned to WHO, okay?
Okay.
We're going to give away one copy of this book at the end to those who answered our question correctly. And, Burnham, that's true. A lot of kids don't know that the Knicks are originally called the Knickerbockers.
Right. Well, they don't know the whole association between New York and Washington Irving and the Knickerbocker Tales, and who reads Washington Irving anymore.
Right.
So most kids wouldn't know that the Knicks are actually the Knickerbockers, that it's just a shortened form.
Right. Jeff, you're up next on Winzenburg on the Weekend. You ready for your question, Jeff?
I'll try one.
Okay, let's see what we got here. Juan Rodriguez got his name from a favorite Puerto Rican baseball player, even though he doesn't play baseball. Juan plays golf. Juan Rodriguez got his nickname from his favorite Puerto Rican baseball player, even though he plays golf. Who is he?
Geez, that's tough.
Think. Juan Rodriguez, famous golfer.
Chichi.
Yeah, Chichi, that's it. He got it from a Puerto Rican baseball player.
All
Good
right.
job, Jeff. You're in the running for this book. Now, is that name considered politically correct?
It sounds borderline,
See,
too.
that's the problem, isn't it? Is that you never know.
But I was thinking about that during the break, and sometimes those politically incorrect names actually were meant to honor someone. And one of the biggest ones was Louis Sokolexis, who was a very popular player for, they were called the Spiders, actually, the Cleveland Spiders. And they wanted to get a new name, 1915.
Okay.
And he had a wonderful career, but then he had bouts with alcoholism, and then the career fell apart. But they wanted to honor him, and so his nickname was Chief. So they honored Louis Sokolexis by calling them the Cleveland Indians. So that wasn't meant as a slap in the face. It was actually meant to honor the man's memory.
And later on, people take it as negative or take it as a slur.
But actually, it was meant as a tribute
affectionately
to Louis Sokolexis. So sometimes things get twisted and turned around when actually they meant the opposite.
Yeah. Well, the book is filled with all sorts of great information. It tells you how Yogi Berra got his nickname. His real name's Lawrence, and he got his name Yogi from a movie. He saw some Hindu spiritual leader in a movie, so his friends started calling him Yogi. It talks about Babe Ruth, of course, but then there's female babes like Babe Didrikson. And also, I have one more question for you before I award our book. Do most players like their nicknames? I think that's what I'm wondering after reading all these different names. Do you have a sense, do players like their nicknames?
Most of them do. Most of them do. There was one. There was a catcher, a man named Jim Price, who wanted to be called the Sensational One. But a guy in the clubhouse just looked at him and shook his head and said, "No way in the world we're going to call you Sensational. You're Thunderside."
Wow.
So he didn't like his nickname, but I think most people, especially if like Reggie Jackson, be calling Mr. October, I'm sure he'd like that.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Burnham. Let's give away a copy of the book. Let me pull out the name, and it goes to Ashley, who answered the Ohio Fats question. Ashley, give us a call back. Get you a copy of the complete book of sports nicknames available at bookstores. Stay tuned to News Radio 1040 WHO.